Welcome to part 2 of our series of the power challenged vehicles of the Malaise area. This video was shaped by you, the people in the comments section, as I've been flooded in my last video about some suggestions that I could use in a part 2. Anyway, without further ado, in this episode we will be taking a closer look at some of the most infamous examples and models that struggled under the weight, emissions, regulations, heavy frames, and restrictive transmissions, and detuning, and overall the era's push for fuel efficiency over performance. Let's start with the Chevy Vega from 1971 to 1977. Now, I talked about the Chevrolet Vega in my last video, but I would like to go into further detail about it, as its 2.3-liter 4-cylinder only produced just 90 horsepower and 130 foot-pounds of torque, and paired with its 2-speed Power Glide automatic transmission. But I will give credit where credit's due, as 2-speed automatics were standard, as if you got an automatic car, you'd usually get a 2-speed. But cars with 2-speed automatics usually had a big V8 that had enough torque to fill in the gap of an extra couple gears, whereas the Vega only had 130 foot-pounds of torque, way less than a V8, and it shows this as the 0 to 60 time stretched to a sluggish 16 seconds. Despite 20 miles per gallon and 25 miles per gallon highway, the 2-speed auto limited the acceleration severely and hampered the car overall, leaving the Vega underwhelming and gutless.
Chevrolet wants you to be sure you get all the small car you can for the money.
Drive a Chevy and believe, and believe. Drive a Chevy and believe. It's a lot of car for the money.
Chevrolet's Vega is priced lower than hatchbacks from two leading foreign makers, $340 less than a VW Rabbit and $200 less than a Datsun B210. Be sure you get all the small car you can for your money.
Drive a Chevy and believe, and believe, and believe.
We jump to 1978 when we see the Dodge Magnum, as it came with a 360 cubic inch V8 producing around 155 horsepower and 270 foot-pounds of torque. A posted 0 to 60 time was about 14 seconds, and fuel economy was around 15 miles per gallon combined, which isn't too bad for a 360 cubic inch V8. But although it had a V8, the Magnum's weight, coupled with the 3-speed auto, made for a sluggish drive.
You are looking at a magic means of transportation. New Dodge Magnum XE, a splendid combination of touring car and luxury car. Consider Magnum XE's exciting update of the classic cord-type grille. Inside, a place of sophisticated instrumentation, electronic wizardry, snug, crafted, comfortable. See the new Dodge Magnum XE, a magic means of transportation.
Then we have the Olds 442, which was once an icon of power, as the 1976 Oldsmobile 442 dropped to the small block 350, producing around 180 horsepower and 275 torque. It took about 11 seconds to hit 60, which for 1976 isn't bad, considering the Mustang SVO, considered a muscle car from the time, had an 8-second 0 to 60, but yet a far cry from its muscle car heyday. Fuel economy was in the range of 12 miles per gallon, which is slightly below average for the time, and its 3-speed automatic, which given is better than a 2-speed in its defense, but was also tacked on with restrictive emissions controls, which made it feel flat, powerless, and gutless.
After making some progress with the company, I decided it was time to celebrate. So I asked Oldsmobile to build me something elegant. A Cutlass Supreme Brougham. Loose cushion look seats, luxurious interior, really plush, yet in a sensible size, practical, easy to park. Perfect for a man of my position.
Old's Cutlass Supreme Brougham. We build them around people with luxury in mind. Can we build one for you?
Hold all call.
Moving on to Ford, we see the Ford Maverick, as this compact car came with an optional 5-liter V8, but only producing a peak 129 horsepower and 240 foot-pounds of torque. With a higher range 0 to 60 time of around 12 seconds, it was decently quick for the time, but fuel economy suffered as it only got around 13 miles per gallon city, and with all these combinations such as low power and a 3-speed auto left drivers wanting more, as the leaned out carburetor settings and emissions related tuning added another layer of restriction onto that. Another Ford product that suffered from emissions was the '76 Ford Thunderbird, with a 7.5-liter V8, which only managed just around 202 horsepower. Although in its defense, the Cadillac 8.2-liter V8, which was a far bigger V8 than the 7.5, only made a weak 190 horsepower, 10 less than the Thunderbird did. But it did, however, manage to squeeze out 350 foot-pounds of torque, which isn't too bad. Its 0 to 60 time was around 10 seconds, which at the time was respectable for the era, but fuel economy was a dismal 10 to 12 miles per gallon combined. Big V8 equals low fuel economy, and with a tall 2.26 rear-end ratio, the T-Bird prioritized comfort over speed, particularly with its 3-speed auto, as with this car, you need a driver's license as well as a boating license, as this car weighed over 5,000 pounds.
The 1977 Thunderbird cleared for takeoff.
For 1977, a completely new Thunderbird idea takes wing. A new Thunderbird look. A new Thunderbird price. A new Thunderbird size. This trimmer Thunderbird was born for flight with a refined suspension system and wide stance. You'll feel its quick agility and the quiet luxury of its ride. But most surprising, this luxurious Thunderbird, exactly as you see it here, comes with a down-to-earth price of $54.34. A price that includes power steering, power brakes, automatic transmission, V8 engine, vinyl roof, radio, and more. The 1977 Thunderbird. Fly one. When America needs a better idea, Ford puts it on wheels.
Let's go back to Chevy for a minute to talk about one of their most successful cars, the Corvette, as even the Corvette wasn't safe, as this 1976 model featured the iconic 350 small block V8, which I made a video on, which you should check out later. Anyway, this V8 churned out about 180 horsepower and 270 foot-pounds of torque. Though it managed a 0 to 60 time of 8.5 seconds, considered quick for this era, the emissions controls restricted its full potential. Fuel economy hovered around 12 to 15 miles a gallon, with the option of either a 3-speed automatic or a less restrictive 4-speed manual. The Corvette wasn't the sports car it once was. But Chevy does deserve some credit for keeping the Corvette around those times, especially as the Corvette always had a V8 option. I'm looking at you, Mustang. Let's move on to the Mercury Cougar, as this car was known for luxury but also muscle. But it also saw its V8 downgraded to around 173 horsepower and 290 foot-pounds of torque in 1977. With a 0 to 60 time of around 11 seconds, it was decent, but it was a far cry from its former glory. Fuel economy averaged around 11 miles per gallon, and the tall rear-end gear ratios made it clear that this car was now all about a smooth ride and not speed.
Midnight is mystery. Midnight is excitement. Now, midnight is Cougar, the Midnight Cat, in midnight blue and chamois. A bold new Mercury Cougar XR7 for $78, with deeply cushioned buckets, floor shift, console, and padded tire deck. Cougar XR7 Midnight Cat.
Isn't this your year to join the cat set?
Moving on, let's talk about the 1979 Pontiac Bonville, which offered a diesel option, the 5.7 Olds diesel. Despite its large displacement, it only made 120 horsepower and 220 foot-pounds of torque, with a 0 to 60 time of around 15 seconds, but a respectable average fuel economy of around 22 miles per gallon, which most cars of this segment were getting around 10 to 15, which is the only defining feature for this car, as this engine became infamous for its horrible reliability, along with the sluggish 3-speed auto paired to it, struggled to make it even roadworthy.
For 1980, Pontiac introduces MPG, more Pontiac excitement to the gallon. Want good gas mileage without giving up comfort? With its completely redesigned outside, formal new roofline, Pontiac's new Bonneville gives you cruising range in a car you'd like to cruise in.
Welcome to California. Have a nice trip? On one tank full. No kidding, that's a long way.
That's more Pontiac excitement to the gallon.
Now let's take a detour away from specific cars, as one of my viewers suggested that I cover the difficulty of keeping cars tuned, as besides their underwhelming performance, these engines were notoriously hard to keep running well, as leaner carbureting settings, retarded cam timing, and a restrictive distributor tuning caused frequent headaches, rougher idling, and misfiring and stalling became regular issues, especially as emissions requirements forced more restrictive configurations. Emission systems like catalytic converters and smog pumps further choked the exhaust flow, adding to the tuning challenges, and rear-end ratios were often as high as 2.25 to 1, which were implemented to save fuel, but hurt acceleration even further, especially when paired to sluggish 3-speed and 2-speed automatics being offered at the time. And yet another viewer suggested covering the topic of the infamous 5-mile-per-hour bumpers, mandated for safety, which added significant weight to these cars, making these already heavy vehicles even slower and sluggish. Models like the Thunderbird and the Cougar felt more like driving boats than muscle cars, as I previously mentioned. One of my viewers also suggested to cover the national 55-mile-per-hour speed limit, as in 1974, the national 55-mile-per-hour speed limit was introduced to conserve fuel during the oil crisis. Though it did help improve fuel efficiency, it also made driving these already underpowered cars even less enjoyable on the road. I was also getting some suggestions about talking about the corporate average fuel economy, or CAFE standards, which set a new bar for fuel efficiency that is still in place today, leading to lower compression ratios across the board. Once common ratios of 10 to 1 or higher dropped around 8 to 1, severely cutting power. Also suggested by a viewer talking about horsepower ratings shifting from gross to net, making the numbers seem even lower on paper than they already were. Another person suggested that I also cover the early 1980s cars too, as they saw the same limitations as even after Detroit adapted. Models like the Chevrolet Citation and Ford Fairmont, while lighter, still suffered from restrictive tuning and a lack of power. The emphasis on economy continued, and where reliability improved somewhat, performance remained secondary. In conclusion, the Malaise Era power plants, shaped by stringent regulations and changing industry focus, left a lasting impact on American automotive history. Underpowered, hard to tune, and built for fuel efficiency over thrill, these engines set the stage for future innovations, and though they fell short on performance, they taught the manufacturers lessons which paved the way for the advancements that we see today. Thank you for joining us on part 2 of our journey through the Malaise Era's power plants. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like down below for the algorithm, and if you really like this video, maybe consider subscribing if you already aren't. And let me know down in the comments if you have owned any of these cars. Anyway, I'll catch you in the next one.